Anyway, Craig, you were sucking my dick there for a
Yeah.
second. Keep it going. I'm almost there.
Almost there. Almost there. Almost there. Oh, it's good. It's so good.
What a great way to start out a Tracy K. Smith fucking podcast.
I'm the best fucking poet. Fuck Tracy K. Smith, bitch.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. So I read it because I don't know why. I usually don't like going back and reading my old shit, unless it's like been 5-10 years, and then I could read it and feel good about it. But I decided to read that one the other day, and I was like thinking, why is this one good? What makes it? Why did I write why it's good? It's because I fucking had that poem in my
10
head.
years. Yeah, that marinating for 10 years.
And I didn't write it like I would have wrote it 10 years ago. I wrote it with all the history surrounding it. It became a poem not just about the thing that happened, but about like telling that story over and over again and really just fucking being sick of it and like feeling bad about it. And and like telling the part of the story that I always left out at the end.
Well, I think you left two parts out. I think you left out when you were telling us how depressed he was before he went to sleep and how weird he was fucking acting and how it was a suicide, man. That's what you left out. He knew he was gonna die. And like really the poem, by the way, we were talking about it afterwards. I'm like, it's a poem about men and their emotions and how scared we are of our own fucking emotions, dude.
Yeah.
That's why you use humor to cover up the pain, just like I do. When I talk about my brother or whatever, you use humor to cover up the pain. And your roommates use the holidays or whatever, the superficial veneer of that, and he couldn't talk about his emotions either. That's why he did it. If he'd have just talked to you that night, maybe it wouldn't have happened. But men can't, because to men, talking about emotions is weakness. And no, I don't. The only emotions men are comfortable talking about is fucking rage and fucking getting off. How much they want to fuck some broad over there. Oh, fuck her up her fucking ass. This fucking bitch. She's a real piece of ass. Let me tell you something. Fucking suck that dick like.
I didn't really put this in a poem or anything. He wasn't exactly a typical, straight, fucking strip club guy. He was definitely he was gay.
Obviously, he had something going on, and obviously, I mean, the guy's dressing in the guy dies. The guy's in his own house, basically alone. He's got his roommate there, and he's dressed in a fucking collar shirt tucked into his khaki pants, and he's backing up this fucking tree. Yeah, the guy's fucking probably a little fruity. All right.
No,
or
he
whatever.
He was definitely gay.
Whatever, man.
I mean, he was still part of that like older generation, though, for sure. He was like 44 at the time, and that was over 10 years ago. So I mean, he definitely was closed off. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Like he was closed off about his sexuality. He never said he was gay, but he always had a friend over, and it was obvious they were dating.
Right, so it may not have been anything about him being gay that made him kill himself. It may have just been the spurned lover or whatever. But whatever the case, that doesn't mean that he wasn't hiding his emotions, dude. Because the emotions that he was going through was, I'm fucking suicidal and I'm in pain and there's nobody I can talk to about it. In fact, I can't even talk to my roommate about it. The only thing I can tell him is to live his life. There's vague nonsense. Like really, really what he's trying to tell himself is live your life. Live your life. Just live your life. Fuck it. Maybe. Who knows? Maybe he had AIDS or something. Maybe that was the pain at the back of his head, or maybe he had cancer. Yeah. Who the fuck knows?
Yeah, I think he had something. But then again, I told you that the part of the story where I knew he had some kind of disease, but when I listed the diseases he told me, which I forgot what they are, honestly. But the family's like, nah, we didn't know anything about that. So he either was lying to me or lying to them.
Right. The guy full of secrets, full of things that he couldn't tell people.
The epitome of South Florida.
And by the way, that it worked so well with Satan Says because that's in the confession with Jennifer Greenberg and Suicide Trees because those poems are all about how women, well, not Suicide Trees, we'll get to that in a second, but the confession and Satan Says are all about how women can't talk about their families to strangers, you know? Like that's the thing. Men can't talk about their emotions, women can't talk about their families. Their families just beat it into your head from fucking day one to day a million. You know, whatever happens in this house stays in this house.
Is
Keep
that
your
really a
family
thing?
secret. I mean, of
Man,
course, of
makes
course.
sense for her, especially because her family was so like strict and like old fashioned in a way, and her poetry just railed against everything. Her entire upbringing and her entire life before poetry. That poem
And I
in
mean,
particular is I don't know. I never. That's an interesting poem. We should talk about one day, as Satan says.
in the confession, I'm trying to confess this thing in my heart. You know, that I'm gay, that I feel this way about women, and the mom fucking ignores her. The mom plays fucking dumb.
Oh, gay
All
like
these
happy.
poems,
Oh my
yeah,
god, what a great line.
they're all great, but you see what I'm saying? They're all about how people just don't talk. People can't talk, and even when they do, the world punishes you for it. Um, the world punishes you for
Oh,
saying what's going on in your heart, and so that's the theme of so much great poetry and so much our problems in life. I'm trying to teach these kids that language is power. They all just sit there like a bunch of dumb rocks, like proving my point, you know. Well, trying to explain it, it's like,
yeah, not talking is powerful too. Fucking yeah, I hate days like that, man. You're not in a good like mindset to read this poem. I don't think. Because this
nah.
poem just definitely isn't like any of those poems you mentioned. It's more of a takes a bit of work.
Well, here's the thing about Tracy K. Smith, and I'll lay out my case for and against her right at the start. You can complicate, as I'm sure you will, my understanding of her work. But the reason I like her work is because the images are so vivid and so weird.
Yeah.
And they are compelling. They are memorable in a sense. But what I don't like about her work is that the subject matter so rarely seems very personal. And I mean, for fuck's sake, that one poem, she's literally talking about 2001: A Space Odyssey, you know, for like one part of the poem. Um, you know, it's cool because she can take somebody like Charlton Heston and make them a character, and it seems very dreamlike, and I'm engaged in it on that level, but um, at the same time, there's very little scene and there's very little personal going on. I know the other poem is about her father's death, and so in that capacity, it is personal. But the way that Tracy K. Smith like tackles something is by talking about it like sideways. You know,
Oh yeah, you're right
I'm
about
gonna
that.
talk around it. I'm gonna talk around the fucking thing, and that's how I'm gonna get at it. And that's
Yeah.
why I've always felt like she existed in this part of the pantheon of our knowledge where it's like we recognize that she's brilliant and we recognize that she's really good, but she's never been anybody's favorite, and she's never been somebody that constantly comes up, and that we revere all of their work, and we buy all of her fucking work, and we memorize her poems, and she's always coming up. I kind of feel like she exists in this, like, probably closer to like Robert Hass
Hmm.
or
Interesting.
what's
Yeah,
his
that you
name,
mentioned him because I
or
kind of I feel that way a little bit with her, especially because these two poems are the ones for me from her that matter the most. Um, Even from they're both from Life on Mars, which is the book she wrote that won the Pulitzer Prize back in I think 2018 or something like that. And I read that. I mean, I love them so much, and I love them because they're not what I normally like for all the reasons you just mentioned. You know, they're kind of talking around something, coming at the subject matter sideways. Usually is like a recipe for me to just cross my eyes and start drooling. You know, like I need it in my face most of the time, and so anyway, like the rest of the book kind of does that a little bit for me. Whereas these two poems really they don't do it as they do it in a way, but and I'll go into why I think it works in these ones. But yeah, man, like it has these high for me. Has these super high highs. These two poems, my God, it's full of stars, especially. And I know there's a lot of stuff in this poem, but and we'll get to that. We'll get to the poem. But man, like it's tough. It's tough for me to get through a book of hers. Basically, is what I'm trying to get at. And I like her newer book, Such Color, is like a compilation and has a bunch of new poems in it. And Laura had read, went through it and kind of liked it. And but I know for a fact she doesn't love it. Because like even the ones that she bookmarked, I'm like, hey, what poems? Like I'm not gonna sit here and like go through the whole book a couple days before we do this, but like let me just hit the highlights. And I like read the ones she bookmarked, and just like, yeah, there's something there, but it's like, I still kind of just like my mind's wandering when I'm reading them a little bit too much. I'm not really sure what she's talking about.
That's definitely a big problem, dude.
Right. Right. And so I did want to bring in some new stuff, but the new stuff just, even, like I said, even in this book, it's like, it's hard to find poems I really attached to. And I might attach to these poems for personal reasons because of what they're about, but we'll get into that. But yeah, Robert Hass is a really good comparison because he has, like, for me, like, he's exactly as you're describing it, like a guy that's like from a distance is like, oh yeah, that motherfucker definitely is doing his own thing, and it's admirable because he's doing it with a lot of skill, and you can point and say time and materials. Like whenever I think of Robert Hass, I think of that poem, which is another poem that is the same for me, the same way, not the same feeling I get because I didn't really feel a lot when I read that, but when I read it, I was like, there's a point when it clicked for me, like what he's doing with not just like what the poem is about. It's really about a really abstract idea, but it gets into the way it's structured. And I would never think to like space out certain like a stanza the way he does in that poem, because I don't have a reason to. But when you read that poem, you read it and you're like, oh, this is why he's doing it, because it's making you read it a certain way, and you need to read it a certain way to get what the fuck he's talking about. And of course, that's by its own nature a roundabout way of saying something. It's like a back door to saying the thing he wants to say, because if he said it, it would sound dumb. You have to feel it. There's the only one way to experience is to feel it, and that's what My God, It's Full of Stars is all about. And honestly, the other one, well, I'll call it Walk. It doesn't have a title. The one that ends the repetition on walk, walk, walk. It's doing the same. It's trying to do the same thing, but it's like it's leaving out a bunch of like the mystery of the universe shit that she gets into with My God, It's Full of Stars. They're both about her dad dying, by the way. It's just less obvious in My God, It's Full of Stars. Or more about grief, I guess, because it's obviously not directly about her dad dying, but it's there. So what did you think of this poem, Craig?
There are parts of it I love. There are parts of it I'm just like, I'm rolling my eyes, man. So I'm opening it right now. I'll go over, like, here's what I mean when I said there's like, it's hard to love her. So this is how she opens the poem. My God, It's Full of Stars. We like to think of it as parallel to what we know, only bigger. One man against the authorities, or one man against a city of zombies. One man who is not, in fact, a man sent to understand a caravan of men now chasing him like red ants, let loose down the pants of America. Man on the run. It's like, dude, what the fuck are you
Well,
fucking talking about?
yeah. See, okay, so when I look, there's a reason why I don't know what I said last week, but it's something along the lines. It's like one of my favorite poems that I've ever read. And I'll try to figure out why that is because I when I said that last week, and I'm like, and I kind of was like scared to go back to read it because it's been a few years, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna like it. And I started to read it, and I'm like, I don't like it anymore, just because of that first part. And
Yeah,
and it's goofy. It's so like goofy and like, it is playful, and it's in its own way. It's like it's well written, I guess, but it just feels like what I wrote down a couple times is like it's just she's like getting her footing in the door on some like roundabout way. Like you said it, talking around something. Like it is kind of talking around. So it's not even really talking about much at all yet. Like think about this: the first line. We like to think of it as
man,
as
what is it?
parallel to what we know.
What do we know?
It's
You see what I'm saying? Like, I
right. Well,
don't
that's the
know.
thing. She doesn't say what it is. What do you think but after you've read the whole poem, what do you think that means? Like, what is she talking about?
I think it means life. I think she means life after death. I think she means we like to think of death as parallel to life and what we understand of life. You know,
Yeah.
which is one man against the authorities. Only bigger. One man against the authorities. One man against a city of zombies. One man who is not, in fact, a man sent to understand a caravan of men now chasing him like red ants, which made me think of OJ, but I don't know. Let loose down the pants of America. Man on the run. Man with a ship to catch, a payload to drop. This message is going out to all of space, though maybe it's more like life below the sea, silence, buoyant, bizarrely benign, relics of an outmoded design. Some like to imagine a cosmic mother watching through a spray of stars.
This is, I think, where
So
it kind of
yeah,
the
like
poem starts to get
so
going
here's
a little bit.
yeah, here's where we're going. Okay, cool.
So, like,
Mouthing yes, yes, as we toddle toward the light, biting her lip if we teeter at some ledge, longing to sweep us to her breasts. She hopes for the best while the father storms through adjacent rooms, ranting with the force of kingdom come, not caring anymore who might snap us in its jaw. As if there are two forces watching out for us, as if after death we can see God and the mother of God or
yeah,
whatever. So I don't know
yeah.
if this,
I
like
think
I
the
said,
problem with that first half of this, look, this is like 5 poems, right? It's like five
right.
sections, and they're each their own thing, kind of. And we could talk about how they relate, but this problem in the first half of this poem, it's like she's just trying to gain her footing about what it is, and I think it is like multiple things. It's like death, life, the cosmos, all these things in one. And I really get that by I mean, she literally says a cosmic mother watching through spray of stars, and she like settles in on these two like kind of vignettes, or like they're not exactly scenes though. They're not specific. They're kind of like it's hard to explain what the hell it is, but it's playful. There's images. It's a metaphor for this feeling or idea she has. And she does it again right at the end of this first part with the library stuff, which is, she's like, it's almost afraid. It's almost like she's afraid to like say exactly what she means. You know what I mean? And so when I said like started reading this the other day, and I'm like, I don't know if I like this anymore because I don't like poetry like that, dude. I really don't. And this first like section of this poem is like it's tough. It's tough to like keep going, and of course it gets goofier and weirder as it goes on with those two sections you mentioned with Charleston Heston and the Space Odyssey one. Um, but man, I read it today, and it just everything. It's a
Everything
poem.
hit.
Everything
Well,
hit. It's a poem you have to like you can't see. It's not for you. It might not be for you, because you read that first part and you're done. It's over. You
Yeah.
know, I read that when I first read it years ago. It had a similar effect on me too. It kind of, had to power through it, But once I got to the end, it just like blew the lid off of my fucking head. Um, and I never knew why. I never knew. I still don't really know why. I kind of like broke the poem down a little bit for this. But you know how it is when you're trying to break down something like a complicated poem. You kind of start going in circles a little bit with it. That's how it was with Poem to the Reader for me by Sharon Olds as well. It's another one that kind of like blows your head off, but it's hard to explain why exactly. Um, and
I
well,
think
with
also
Sharon Olds
better,
is
John. You're also
yeah.
better at like reading through enigmatic writing. You're a big fan of Faulkner's the Sound and the Fury. You even like the Benji parts, actually your favorite parts.
Yes.
So I think that this like John
Well,
Ashbery thing that she's
here,
doing
here's the
is
thing. It's personal. It's sentimental. There's the heart at the bottom of it. Unlike some other like writing that you read like this, and other writing you read like this by her. Like
right,
this one
right.
has heart at the end of it, has heart in it, and when you realize it's there all along, it like makes the poem a little more bearable. Especially honestly, the first part for me is probably the worst. Even though you
Yeah.
mentioned the 2001 Space Odyssey part, I kind of like that, and I'll explain why later. But
Well, it's written
I
in
like
scene,
it
and
better
it gets that.
now. But well, the Charleston Heston thing does the same thing. It's like a little mini scene, little vignette.
Yeah, and
Like
that's my
it
favorite
really
part. That part's like a fucking dream, dude.
right,
You know,
right.
and
And
it's go ahead.
sorry, I'm cutting you off, man. You were talking about if you want to
Well,
go
I
back.
don't want you to feel like I just fucking think this poem's a piece of shit, okay? Because I definitely don't. There are parts of this poem I fucking love. It's just I wish that. Um. Okay, so here's my ultimate problem with Tracy K. Smith, and it's not some. It's you're right. This is. I mean, we were joking about it last week, but there's some forms of writing that you have to acquire a taste for to appreciate. The same way that there are forms of chocolate and wine and anchovies and olives and whatever the fuck else. I made pate the other day, which is literally like chicken livers that have been fried in brandy and ground up into a paste. My fiance's never gonna appreciate that shit because she's never trained her taste buds to fucking eat something that disgusting and appreciate it just for its flavor. But so my point being, Tracy K. Smith, I could not read this poem to my students and get them to appreciate it on any level.
No,
I don't think. They
nah,
would roll as soon as the fucking first stanza's gone, they're done. They're
right.
fucking done.
This is
And that's
poem.
just,
This is a poem written for poets, man. It's written for.
well, Tracy K. Smith is a poet for poets. John
Mhm.
Ashbery is a poet for poets. The Wasteland. Um,
Oh, there you go. That's a good comp right there to this shit. That poem's even more off the fucking walls.
T.S. Eliot, The Wasteland. At some point, we're gonna have to talk about it.
I don't know
You
about
cannot appreciate that poem just being some willy nilly fucking asshole just wandered in off the street. So in a way, it's totally against the philosophy of Amari Baraka, who is like, if you want to know if your stuff's good, go find somebody out there digging a hole in the street and try to read it to them. And if they get up and they don't punch you in the face, then you got something. They would punch you in the face with this poem. They would. But they'd be wrong.
Yeah,
They'd
fuck
be
them.
fucking wrong.
Listen, here's what I'm
Amari
gonna.
Baraka, and even though this kind of sounds a little bit like Amari Baraka in the beginning, and by the way, Amari Baraka is somebody else who, if you tried to read his poems to a class or to somebody digging a hole in the street, with the exception of black art, they would not know what the fuck you were talking about. But so that philosophy isn't something you stake your whole career on. If you're a poet, anyways, I do think that the advice is a little bit more useful as a fiction writer. I do think that the problem with, and even some great fiction writers still suffer from them. We were talking about, what's her name? Alice Munro. Alice Munro kind of suffers from this problem too of inaccessibility.
Mm-hmm.
But, but I
Yeah,
definitely
man.
don't hate this poem. There are parts of it I fucking love. It's just, man, I really wish that we had found her earlier on in her life, and we could, like, even if she never would have gained the acclaim that she's gained now. God damn, would her poems be a whole fucking lot like easier to read and understand, But but
I mean, she
Shelby,
did win the
maybe
Pulitzer Prize, so she's got something
I
going for
know,
her.
I know, and I'm just some asshole who teaches ENC 1101, but goddamn, dude, like I don't know.
She's definitely look. Without the fifth part of this poem, well, it's kind of stupid to say that, but I will say it anyway because I'm kind of stupid. Without the fifth part of this poem, forget it. Just forget it. Like it's one of those poems. Those you've read them. Those long poems. You might have like bought a book at the poetry festival or something, and you're reading one of these long poems, and it just kind of meanders and doesn't really go anywhere. But this poem does. It hits on the end for me. Um, because it's personal. Like it becomes personal. Not only that, she ties everything together. The Charleston Heston thing feels like when you first read it, it feels like goofy. Like it's cool. Like it's kind of like you said, surreal, kind of goofy though, and like why is this here? That's what I thought when I first read it. So it's not only a long poem that requires a lot of attention, it's a long poem that requires a lot of attention, and hopefully you get something out of that first read. And if you really want more, it's there. Like you could read, it's a poem that requires attention for 5 fucking pages or however long it is in the book, and then you got to read it again. you know, it's I mean, there's something to be said about fuck those kinds of poems. I don't know, like it's kind of funny that I'm saying that, and that we are kind of alluding to that because of who we went through an MFA, and we should be the people who would love this type of thing,
Yeah.
And I
Well, we
happen to
do
love
love
this
this.
particular. I do happen to love this particular one, but like there are a lot of her poems that are like that don't land for me. But yeah, I mean, it's a motherfucker. It's a motherfucker to sit here and say, or to tell somebody, hey, go read this poem. It's hard. I read it today, man. I don't I don't want to sound like I'm being like I'm trying to prop this thing up more than it really should be, but man, I read it today and I just like the grief. I don't know. There's something about the grief at the end that really resonated with me. And she's not writing about a fuck up brother or a shitty dad. She's writing about a great person. At least that's the feeling we get. And I don't want to like get bogged down in the critique of how that could have been portrayed better, but
Well, her father was a genius, right? Her father, like Leon Lee, had a father that was a brilliant fucking guy,
right.
and
Well, as far
part
as
of
we know, he worked on the damn Hubble telescope. I mean, he had to have been.
yeah.
But I don't know like the specifics, of course, because the specifics aren't really in here. And
Right.
so, look,
Well, let's just talk about the fucking final part. Let's just read that. I mean, we'll
all
try
right.
and get the images of the end of this poem, number 5. When my father
So,
worked on the Hubble telescope, he said they operated like surgeons, scrubbed and sheathed in papery green, the room a clean, cold, bright white.
so
He'd read Larry Nevin at home and drink scotch on the rocks, his eyes exhausted and pink. These were the Reagan years when we lived with our finger on the button and struggled to view our enemies as children. My father spent whole seasons bowing before the oracle eye, hungry for what it would find. His face lit up whenever anyone asked, and his arms would rise as if he were weightless. perfectly at ease in the never-ending night of space. On the ground, we tied postcards to balloons for peace. Prince Charles married Lady D. Rock Hudson died. We learned new words for things. The decade changed. The first few pictures came back blurred, and I felt ashamed for all the cheerful engineers, my father and his tribe. The second time the optics jibed. We saw to the edge of all there is, so brutal and alive it seemed to comprehend us back. I mean, it's undoubtedly the best part of the fucking poem. And you understand, like I said, you understand, or like you said, rather, you start to understand the the
The
other
point.
segment, the other segments of the poem is that she's trying to understand her father through these things.
Right. So like
Um,
after you read that, like you read the thing about, he read Larry Nevin at home, drank scotch, which kind of alluded to the Charleston Heston when he's asking for a whiskey. There's a literal image of her dad with his arms would rise, which is also an image how she described Charleston Heston like Moses, arms raised high. And then no, she never says, "Oh, my dad's died. That's why I'm thinking about the meaning of life." Never once in the poem does she say it explicitly. But that's the reason why she's writing this thing. And that's the part right after that. My father spent whole seasons bowing before the oracle eye. That's for some reason, even when you read it just now, like I start getting chills and I don't really know why. But think about the description of that and how powerful of an image that is. And you think of the Hubble telescope. For him, that is what it's all about. That's God, like looking out and trying to figure out why we're here. That's his religion. Hungry for what it would find, and even that his arms would rise, and then there's that visual break as if he were weightless. This angelic image of her father, perfectly at ease in never-ending night of space, and then like she juxtaposed that kind of like really high poetic writing with on the ground, like literally, down to earth, describing what it was like to be not. It's not personal. It's not personal. It's like it's like pop culture, right? She does this thing where she juxtaposes like this in this specific part, a personal like anecdote, I guess, or about her father, a very personal thing about her father, about how he viewed the world, with this like general like this is what we did as people back then, this pop culture thing. And she does that, if you think about it, section to section. The first one is like through this modern poetic lens, and it's like really modern poetic lens, which is for you it's kind of gross, and even for me, like we share a lot of taste, of course. But there is value. I mean, it does get somewhere in that first part, and then it goes into this weird, pop culture. Like she's literally using Charleston Heston to try to figure out what the meaning of life is. It's not the point. Like he's trying to explain to her about what the world is. And then bouncing back into section 3 in this like more of a poetic lens, which in that third section, it's the most direct she's being about what the poem is trying to do. She's talking about she's trying to talk about understanding life, I guess, and our place in the universe. And at the end of that one, she starts bringing in the personal. She mentions her father. She said, if it were up to me, I would be sealed tight so nothing escapes, not even time, which would curl in on itself and loop around like smoke. What an awesome fucking image for time. So,
yes.
so that I might be sitting next to my father. Why would she want to like boil her existence or everything in existence down to one moment with her father? She doesn't say, "Oh, it's because I just got back from the hospital and I had to deal with that." Which it's part of what it's weird, because if you like brought this into a workshop and you and I are in there, we're like, well, just talk to us about what's going on, talk to us about your father, go straight to it. But for this poem, obviously it doesn't work like that. You have to come in from the side. And then the final, and the oh no, we're skipping number 4. The 4 goes back to the pop culture lens, which is weird. It's a fucking weird thing to do about a poem about your dead father. Why?
Yeah. Because it's part of his life. He was somebody who grew up in the '60s, and this is a way of understanding him.
Yes,
You know,
exactly. Fucking exactly. And she picks that moment in 2001 at the end when he's like basically having a fucking psychedelic experience going beyond consciousness, right? Whatever Kubrick was trying to say about what happens after you die was what he was showing. You might know better about what the fuck that scene meant. It's been a while since I saw it, but that's what I felt. It felt like he was trying to reach for something. And she says, "Who knows what blazes through his mind?" The character, is it still his life he moves through, or does that at the sorry, I can't read right now, or does that at the end of or is that at the end of all that he can name? And it's just it's just so fucking weird. And then she, she doesn't like just stop on the description of that weird scene. She says, on the set, it's shot after shot until Kubrick is happy. She has to, for some reason, she has this like inkling to bring it down to earth, right? Yep. To bring it back to the practical, to like, it's almost like ironic a little bit. And she does the same thing at the end when it goes back to the more modern poetic, and it becomes pretty personal as well at the end there. But just so looking at the poem, like stepping back, that's the overall structure you see. It's like this balance between the pop culture like view of our existence and the more like, I say poetic, and it's almost it's not quite personal, but it is shown from her point of view in a poetic lens. So I mean, it is kind of like the pop culture versus personal. In the end, she kind of blends it together, and really, it just like, if you want to like try to figure out, all right, here's the craft lesson. How do you end a poem like this? You kind of like is the father mentioned before, but like he was mentioned once, right?
Right.
How do you end a poem like this?
With your dad.
With your fucking dad. I guess.
Well, she had to pick it somewhere. And maybe she didn't figure out what it was about until she'd written all the other stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't know what you're writing about as you're writing. And it kind of comes as a surprise. I feel like it definitely happens more with poets than fiction writers, or non-fiction writers or whatever. I don't know. You gotta just start with an image, right? Is that how it works? Or I don't know. Like I've written poems, but I've never written poems the way you've written poems. You tell me. How does it start?
Well, damn, dude, so you're describing the way you write, probably how she wrote the poem. She didn't come to it with any preconceived notions about what it was, or what it should be. She started fucking writing it, and I think that's probably why the poem starts out the way it does. It's kind of like I said, trying to get its footing. She doesn't nail down, like, we think space is a parallel to what we know. She doesn't say that. She could, and it's true, I think, in the end of the day, but it could also mean we think the meaning of life. We think grief. It could be a bunch of different things. After you end the poem, basically, I said craft lesson. I may have got ahead of myself there, but you take elements. You kind of like find the meaning of the poem. If it were me, I would look back at the poem, at what I had written, and what were the parts that were hot. The parts that are hot for me in this poem are the reflections on like the cosmos, like in that first part. Charleston Heston saying, "Will you fight to stay alive here, riding Earth towards God knows where?" And the third part, it's that one moment where she gets to about her dad, like, I want to be next to my dad. If I could have all time, I would want to be with him the first time he lit a pipe in 1959. And 4 is about like what happens after you die, and obviously it's written in a very obscure way, But you take all those things and it boils down to like, I'm writing about my fucking dad and what he loved and like like now he's gone, so she boils it down, right? She kind of boils it down to the one thing he really loved, and his big, I guess, scientific achievement was getting the Hubble telescope into space and seeing those images and what it could mean for humanity. And she boils it down right at the end there, and she kind of does it in a way that's not like overly sentimental either. And I said the poem is sentimental, but it's like it's very careful with its sentimentality. Even when she starts getting sentimental about her dad lifting his arms as he is weightless, whatever, she says, well, back on Earth, you know, we Prince Charles married Lady Di. We tied postcards to balloons. You know, Rock Hudson died. It's like she's grounding the poem in a very specific place and time. And then it like the thing she does at the end, describing like she does just so much in those last few lines. The first few pictures came back blurred, and I felt ashamed. Like just that one line is moving on its own for me, like because she's describing like her dad's life work in one line and how you might feel when it came back and it didn't matter, right? For all the cheerful engineers, his tribe, the second time the optics jibed, we saw all that there is. So like this is beyond this goes beyond what we knew in 1969 or whatever, whenever 2001 came out, right? We could literally look into the distance, into like nothing, and realize that everything is there. There's so many things there. There's so many stars and galaxies, and it was proved when they did that. And then the last line is so brutal and alive, it seemed to comprehend us back.
Tying back to the first part of the poem where she's writing about God.
Yeah, and also she's writing it like, and not in a direct way, but you could read into like her father, like looking back in a way, like looking back from the stars. Like he gave us those images, and now that's what she thinks of when she looks at them. She thinks, you know, of her dad.
Maybe he is out there. You know?
Yeah, who the fuck knows, right? Who the fuck knows?
It's a weird poem in that sense.
Also, like, dude, it's a weird poem, man. And I can't, like, I feel like so out of my depth trying to talk about it. Because it's weird. I'm conflicted. It's one of those poems like, look, when I read The Simple Truth, I don't like say, well, I didn't like this part of it, but it still moved the fuck out of me. You know, like that poem's easier. It's actually just as hard, but because it doesn't make any fucking sense why it moves you. But it's just like, yeah, it's a weird poem. It's so big. I guess it's just so big, you know. It's just so big. I still think it's really balanced, though. Like if you can point to any part of it and you say, oh, that kind of works with the ultimate idea, that the ultimate point of the poem. But saying, like, nailing down what the ultimate point of the poem is the hard thing to do. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, you could say it's about grief, but it's not all about grief. You could say, oh, it's about finding the meaning of life, or, you know, trying to figure out why are we here in the cosmos, or are people looking back at us? I don't know if it's about that either. It's about a lot of. Is it about like being a person in a moment in time? Fucking kinda. Like a moment in time in the 80s, in the early 90s, maybe. It's kind of about that. It's yeah, it's fucking complicated as shit. The title even is complicated, man. My God, it's full of stars. I mean, I'd never like really thought about it, but obviously it's like somebody looking up or looking through the telescope, you know, the Hubble, or just looking up at the sky and saying that. But like, maybe she's talking about what God is to her, you know, it's the cosmos and everything involved in it. So yeah, this isn't a poem you give to somebody on the fucking, what was the saying? Like on the street?
No, you don't give this to anyone on the street, and you don't give this to anyone in the ENC class.
No, it's not an ENC poem, that's for damn sure. But I'm glad it exists. You know, it's not my, like, her stuff in general is just not my cup of tea. This one worked for me, and I'm glad it did. because it kind of opens my mind up to what poetry can be, and honestly, it's a dangerous poem. You read enough poems. Yeah, you decide what you kind of figure out what you like. There's so many different ways to write a poem and styles and tastes. And but when you read it and there's something there, there's some juice there. It's dangerous because you might want to start writing like that, and you just can't. You got to stay true to yourself, man.
Well, the writing, I think it's also worth noting that the way she writes is gorgeous, and it's
Yes.
worth appreciating for that as well. Like, number 4, which is probably my favorite part, either number 4 or, I did not really like number 3. I did like number 2.
Oh, do you
But
mean the
number
way
4,
she's like describing that scene? That first stanza is gorgeous.
yeah, listen to this. And those last scenes of Kubrick's 2001, when Dave is whisked into the center of space, which unfurls in an aura of orgasmic light before opening wide like a jungle orchard for a love-struck bee, then goes liquid, paint and water, and then gauze wafting out and off before finally night tide, luminescent and vague, swirls in and on and on. Yeah, I mean, the bitch
Pretty.
can write, dude. Like, what are you gonna say? Nobody's ever gonna convince me that she can't write. I mean, she can clearly like write her way around an image,
Yeah, and
and
that
clearly
last
like
stanza also is just like bang, bang, bang. It's so fluid and just lovely. The first
I,
the first part does like get bogged down a little bit, but I think it gets going. It does get going. I don't want to. We said that a million times, but
yeah. I mean, it's
yeah.
worth. This poem is worth having, and it's worth talking about how some. I mean, we talked about this. Like I said, we talked about this with Alice Monroe. You are not going to be able to grasp all of the great like nuances. So there are levels to reading as there are to writing. And this is not a poem for a beginning level reader. You know, it just isn't, and it's never going to be that. And I don't know if Tracy K. Smith is ever going to be that. Um,
Right.
but Alice Monroe is never going to be that.
Right.
And
Yeah, there's plenty of poets that aren't inaccessible to the average Joe, and to the average poet for that matter.
100 fucking percent, man.
Yeah.
It's the way it goes. But c'est la vie, I mean,
Shit, even some of our favorite poets, became a little inaccessible. Look at Rita Dove, and
yeah, yep.
I mean, I think as much as I love, well, God, I was gonna say something else, but I just landed on Lee Young Lee. He's kind of inaccessible, like depending on the
Sort of,
poem.
sort of. There are definitely poems of Leon Lee's I would never give to an ENC class.
Right. Anyway, my point was even with the poets that you love and you think are like just even Sharon Olds has poems where she's not like hitting the way you want her to or whatever. Like, gosh, you write that 1,000 fucking poems in a life, maybe more if you're Sharon Olds, like,
Yep.
geez, you're not gonna. It's not everyone is gonna be My Father Speaks or Poem to the Reader or I Go Back to May or blah blah. She has a lot of highs, but not every poem's gonna be My God, It's Full of Stars. And for some it's more true than others, I guess, but goddamn, man, the high she reached in this poem is insane. And I mean the other poem is good too, but for me it's just less like interesting. It's
Let's
good.
talk about the other one.
It's about grief, like this is the poem when I first picked up Life on Mars. I think I read it. I think it comes after My God, It's Full of Stars, but it's like, oh shit, okay, I see what you're doing. Like, it's it's somewhat down to earth, It's especially compared to the last poem. It's weird, It's like it's written in these like couplets, and it almost feels like there's some kind of poetic structure to it. It is a sonnet. Fuck. I should have done a little bit more research.
It's great. What does the storm set free? Spirits strip the flesh on our slow walk. The poor in cities learn when there is no place to lie down. Walk at night. The streets are minefields. Only sirens drown out the cries. If you're being followed, hang on to yourself and run. No, walk. I wandered through evenings of lit windows, laughter inside walls, the slow step amid street lamps, errant stars. Nothing else below walked. When we believe in the underworld, we buried fortunes for our dead. Low country of dogs and servants where ghosts and gold-stitched robes walk. Old loves turn up on dreams, still livid at every sight. Show them out. The bed is full. Our limbs tangle in sleep, but our shadows walk. Perhaps one day it will be enough to live a few seasons and return to ash. No children to carry our names, no grief. Life will be a brief, hollow walk. My father won't lie still, though his legs are buried in trousers and socks. But where does all he knew and all he must now know walk?
Dude,
Oh man,
I
it's
just
about it's
so
about life after death, and it's about the pain. It's just all. It's like I said earlier that she writes like to the side of something instead of coming directly at it. But who can fucking argue with her methods and reading that? It's just
think
like
about think about the idea that the form of the poem. Like it's a sonnet, which traditionally has a volta right before the last stanza, or like maybe the second to last stanza. Here, it's right before those last two lines, and it makes perfect sense to come at this subject matter sideways. Honestly, when it's written like when it's about her father's death, like she's like, kind of like dancing around it the whole time, and at the end she just reveals what the point of the poem is. That's what always stuck out to me with this poem. It's like the end is just like a sledgehammer. You're like, fuck yeah, all right. And it's not even only here's why I'm writing a poem. And here's why I'm talking about like there's like a scene hidden in here somewhere about her like walking through the streets and then going to bed. It's not really the point, but
well, let's talk about that for a second too. So Tracy K. Smith is different from any other writer that we've talked about, period, in the sense that she's not going to tell you anything. You figure out what the fuck. Like, it's very much David Lynch, the David Lynch philosophy of art. I'm not going to tell you a goddamn thing about what this thing means or why I'm writing it or what I want you to take from it. You take from it what the fuck you will, and you make of it what the fuck you will. But I'm not telling you jack shit. And that
yeah,
can be effective. That can be effective. Marilyn Manson said, "Art should always be a question. Should never be a statement." Um, and in a way, that's kind of the opposite of what Nick always taught us, which is um, not to never, not to always, tie everything off with a ribbon per se, but you got to give the reader some clues as to what the fuck you're talking about, and I think that that's useful when you're like it's useful when you're a young writer, and it's useful when you're a young artist to practice the basics. But when you get to the Picasso level and the David Lynch level and the Stanley Kubrick level, you can stop telling the reader stuff and start letting them do some of the fucking work and figuring this stuff out. That's the
right.
fun. Like Tracy K. Smith definitely writes poems with the aim of people arguing about what the meaning of said poems is. The same way David Lynch, makes what he makes, the same reason Stanley Kubrick made what he made. You do some of the fucking work. I'm not doing all of it for you. I show you everything. I tell you nothing.
Right.
Um,
She doesn't say what he knew. It's only implied he knew a lot, right? Where does he? But where does all he knew and all he must now know walk? What a
right, which
good
tells you
fucking
what?
line, man.
Which
What's
tells you what?
that?
What does that tell you about him or her father?
It tells me nothing really. It tells me what she like is thinking about death. Like what happens after you die. Like even somebody like my
Right.
dad
That's
who
what
could
she's
work on
telling
it.
you.
Even
He's
somebody
dead.
like my dad. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's true. Uh, even somebody like my dad who worked on the damn Hubble telescope, like he had all this fucking knowledge, and is it all just gone? That question is also kind of in the heart of my God, it's full of stars as well. But it's really at the heart of this poem. I mean, it ends on the line. I think it's just a cool, like, it's a way to, like I said, it kind of reveals itself at the end, but it doesn't just reveal itself. It reveals itself and like makes it a little bit more interesting with that last line. But yeah,
that's about all I have for Tracy K. Smith, buddy. No.
All right, yeah, me too.
What do you want to do next time?
I don't know. I have no idea. And my handfuls with this, my hands full with this poem, and I cannot talk. This is why I let you do the talking.
Let's do some more poems, man. Let's do some fucking more poems. Let's do a fucking weird one or a series of weird ones that.
Okay.
This was good, but let's do more than 2 next time. Let's try to do 4.
Okay.
Well,
like 4 like reasonable, like 1-page poems.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And like 1 long one. Or we could do something totally fucking bonkers and talk about. I don't know. I feel like enough people in the world have talked about the wasteland.
Yeah.
And tried to make sense of it. I mean, for fuck's sake, that's like what every literary critic did in like the 1960s and 70s. I actually have a book that compares it to Ken Keesley's One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. But that's interesting. But
Yeah.
I don't know. You know what? I got an idea. Let's talk about the first poems that really moved us. For me, it would be Carolyn Forshay's The Colonel, Yusef Kamanyaka's Nude Interrogation. And then let's talk about our most recent favorite. And let's talk about how we'll continue this discussion and how tastes mature over time and how things become more accessible as you keep reading. So I think Tracy K. Smith is a good example of how you can start to build, or especially these 2 poems, and how you can start to build a more refined taste in poetry, and how you can learn to appreciate poems like this.
All right, that's it. That's kind of interesting.
Let's continue that. For me, yeah, definitely be those 2, be the earliest ones. You can see how rudimentary they are. And those are 2 good poems for showing, ENC students, and we'll talk about poems that ENC students could never appreciate.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's easy. It's fucking Stranger and Wild Thing, man. Those Denise DeHamel and Campbell McGrath.
Fuck yeah, that would be perfect. And we could. What's your 2
Those
most
are early. I don't know, man. Haven't really liked poetry in the last few years, so I'll have to dig deep for that one. I'll talk about something, a little bit further down the line, at least. I'm trying to think of something that's like. This is like a great example of a poem that I would hate when I first started. But yeah, I'm not sure.
We could talk about Ars Poetica, which I fucking hate.
Well, that's the one that comes to mind, but I don't think that one's purely academic, man. It's not like a poem that that I love. But I mean, I'll look at it. I'll see if it's worth talking about. I'm when I think of the jump from like Denise DeHamel, Stranger and Campbell McGrath Wild Thing. Those poems are they're just so they're great because they're so basic in how they're written, but they still make you feel something for whatever reason, and maybe they don't. I haven't read them in a while. Seriously.
I teach fucking Wild Thing every
But
semester, man. It has students have to read it. They have to see it.
okay.
That
So
important. But it is actually a really complicated poem for a young beginner to talk about, or to think about, or to
yeah,
appreciate.
maybe it is because there's just so much like it's just a rapid fire poem. It's changing directions constantly. Um, but there's something about it that just is so easy to like understand and feel. But there's like the jump between like poets like that and like somebody like Lee Young Lee, I think. Because as much as I loved Lee Young Lee, I didn't really understand a damn thing he was saying the first few years. But then he just wallops you, you know. Even recently, when I read through all of his work, like he has this thing where you'll be reading it and you're like, I didn't get that poem at all, and you like reread it. And I'm like, I don't fucking get that poem, and you're just like, all right, I just got to keep going, and you keep going, and you know, you get a few like that, and then you get one that just like speaks to your fucking soul. It just rips your chest open, and you're just like, yes, like I loved you before I was born, or this room and everything in it. Those two poems are great examples of that. But I don't really want to talk about Lee Young Lee, so in relation to
It's a simple truth.
you know, go to the simple truth.
Well, why
That's
not?
like the other end of the spectrum, like the height of the highs poetry that you. I don't think if you read it to an ENC class. I mean, I have, and nobody got it. It's one of those poems you got to read a few years in, you know, like when you develop. That might be a good example, honestly, to bring to. Um, to
Dude,
bring
I know
to
what I want to fucking talk about.
which
I
one?
want to talk. I want to talk about Sheep Child, and I want to fucking talk
Oh
about
God! Wait, what's the second one?
Child Beater by AI, and maybe I can convince you that those two poems are actually really fucking good.
All
Um,
right, you want to just talk about those two? Let's do it. Because Sheep Child is a long fucking poem from what I remember.
it is. It is. It's a weird fucking turn. Um, we'll talk about those two, and we'll talk about Blackheart, and the theme will be.
Just throw Blackheart in there.
Yeah, the theme. Well, they all tie in thematically, and the theme is hate filled writing. You know, just writing with hate. Uh, in fact, you could title the podcast episode that "Writing with Hate" because it's something. It's the exact opposite of what poets do these days. You know, um, I feel like people think that's what poetry is supposed to cure. It's supposed to cure hate. And I just don't think
Mm.
that's so. I
Well,
don't.
it's really hard to write a good poem with hate, dude. I think that's more the problem than anything.
Worse.
Because it usually
Uh,
comes off as like angsty, you know, like you didn't really think it through. Like that's like kind of the definition of anger. You're not thinking shit through. You're not calming down. Um, and poetry is all,
there's very little artistic and poetic
and
in hate.
yeah,
But
and like a lot.
there are things there. Go ahead. You're gonna say something.
Yeah, and it goes against like how I think where like people are taught to write in workshops where it should be methodical and like revision. You know, like a good hate poem feel always has to feel like one draft. You know, like just a fucking like the Mari Baraka poem, machine gun fire, just like you know, he literally writes that. We've said it before. He literally writes machine gun fire into his poetry and
Yeah.
in phonetics. It's a wild fucking poem that would never work in a workshop setting, and nobody could teach anybody how to write that. You just have to be a Murray Baraka in the '60s or '70s or whenever you wrote it, with all that fucking shit going on around him. But it's
It's
also a very it's like a fucking weird. Uh, anti-Jew poem too, a little bit. So we got to talk about that too, I guess.
I mean, it's totally racist.
Yeah,
He spouts about every fucking racial slur that he possibly can. Um, very violent towards his own people, quote unquote. Um, but it's also great. It's got this beautiful fucking ultra at the end of it. Child Beater by AI is just disgustingly brutal. It's like the most violent, disgusting, hate-filled fucking thing I've ever read in my life about beating a fucking infant child to death. But it's also beautiful. And Sheep Child's literally about bestiality and the lore that exists around it and the inhumanity of man.
Sounds good.
But they're all great. I mean, to me, this is the fun of art. Is seeing every angle of somebody's soul. I want to like Tupac and Eminem and Biggie Smalls showed you everything. They showed you fucking everything. Every corner of every facet of their fucking soul was on display. The goody and the bad, everything that they were scared of. And to me, that's art. To me, that's the point of art is to be brave enough to show all of that. And most people aren't. Most people aren't willing to talk about this stuff. Most artists aren't willing to talk about this stuff.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about it next time.
Cool. So 3 poems. All right.
All right. Cool.
Then I'm gonna kick your ass and make you pick a fucking short story. So I've been picking short stories like crazy lately, and hopefully, somewhere down the line I can show you some new poems, and hopefully I can get you interested in poetry again, man. I don't know why you're so down in the dumps, John. Like,
I'm doing all right. I feel all right.
Life's beginning anew. You're about to have a fucking kid, man. Like,
Yeah.
how is everything not beautiful? Like, I don't know, man. I don't know.
Well, it turns out, Craig, just because I'm having a kid doesn't mean all the fears and anxieties that I've had all these years about having kids suddenly goes away.
But that's what's great is that they're still there. And you got to be writing about that stuff. And you got to be excited about that stuff. You got to be fucking, engaged in life about that shit. And it's, and here's the great thing, John. Everything that you're afraid of, very much possible. All right, very much possible. In fact, probably fucking likely. Okay, probably fucking likely. But you know what? It's part of life, and it's beautiful, and you embrace it. This is all just a ride, John. Everything from the time you're born until you die, you're just on a fucking roller coaster. You're just rolling with it. And the students don't read the fucking shit for ENC 1101. Well, fuck it. And they fucking want to go to the DMV rather than be in your class. Well, you roll with the punches, man. Part of the game.
Yeah, I know.
You just roll with it, buddy. So, I don't know. You gotta have fun in life, man. You gotta have fun.
Yeah.
I think the other problem with poetry, this is why E.E. Cummings is so good. At some point we have to talk about him too, is he never took any of it fucking serious. He never took a fucking goddamn second of his life or his job serious. But it works. It fucking works. It works so well. He's so good. It worked better with him than it's ever worked with anyone we've talked about before.
God, he can be so different too from poem to poem. Pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's like he reinvented the language at a certain point.
Yeah, sometimes it's incomprehensible too.
Very incomprehensible.
But when it hits, dude, it hits. That thing that I was talking about with Robert Haas, and you're like, that one poem, Time and Materials, and eventually like clicks. What Cummings did it all the time, for me anyway. Like it will click, and you're just like, oh shit. It's kind of like when you first start reading Shakespeare for a class or whatever, and your teacher's like, oh, you just gotta get used to it. And you read it, and it's like, I don't really understand anything that's happening, and then eventually you just find it, and it clicks.
Yeah, it just all starts making sense, and you can look back on it. But that's, again, we're getting back to the levels of reading and levels of writing.
Yeah.
Which is really, I guess, it's just the theme of this podcast is starting to work our way there, talking about how tough it is, man. It's tough. There are levels of teaching too. There, and like
Mm-hmm.
I'm 7 years in, and some days it's still tough. Even with ENC, it's still fucking tough. It's not that I don't know the material. It's that getting them to appreciate what I'm doing and why they're there, and what the material is trying to show them, and all that. Like the gulf between us. See, that's the other thing, is the gulf between you and the reader can be too great also, or you and the students, or you and the whoever. The gulf is just too great. The country between us, man. It's too fucking big.
Yeah, we used to talk about it all the time when we get drunk together and be like, dude, I'm on my sixth beer. You're only on your second. We
Yeah,
cannot
dude.
be friends.
You don't understand a fucking word I'm saying, bro. Catch
Yeah.
up, man. God,
Yeah. How stupid was that?
it was great though. It was so dumb, but it was so beautiful, and
Yeah.
it was part of all of it. Um. Anyways, I like Tracy K. Smith. I'll never love her, dude. It's just the way it is.
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, I love this poem. I especially love My God, It's Full of Stars, but it's tough, man. It's really tough to get into some of the other poems. Maybe one day, when I'm smarter. Um, but yeah, man, let's talk about the Goat Boy or whatever the fuck.
Hell
And
yeah. It'll be fun, dude. It'll be fun. All right.
All right, man. I'll
All right.
talk to you later. Take
I'll
care.
see you soon in like 2 weeks, right? Something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll be down about a week in a couple days.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I will see you then, buddy. Take
All right,
care.
man. Later.